The agenda today is that we begin with a question for everybody who has logged in terms of what questions do you still have, do you have remaining? Then we will go into presentation of the facts and the findings that we've learned, a summary of those findings. Principal Abdul Muhammad will then speak and elaborate on those findings, give you some details about his experience through all of this. And then we will come back to you all to discuss your thoughts, your ideas, your thinking around steps that need to happen next. We're particularly interested in parents and students of Lindblom. And then we will close out the meeting, and of course, there will be follow-up after that for those who volunteer or decide that you want to take action or sign up to take action. There'll be follow-up after that. Did I miss anything, commission members?
No.
Okay. Then let's get started. First question is, what questions do you have? If you could just type your questions in the chat. Okay, 15 seconds are up. Has there been a collection of feedback from the students on the situation? I'll go ahead and answer that one now. There has not. We have not had the ability to communicate with students. Part of the reason for inviting students to this town hall was to get that very feedback. And so we hope to do that toward the end. Excellent question. Is that Akila? All right, let us start with the presentation. Give me one quick second to share my screen.
Brother Troy.
Yes, sorry.
That last question regarding a collection of feedback from the students on the situation, we have heard some students' feedback. It hasn't been a collection, but it has been a group that have communicated. And the ones who did communicate said that they look forward to Principal Muhammad coming back. So it wasn't a collection, it was a grouping of them though, that did communicate. Out of the group, it was about probably more like 90% of them that expressed that they wish that he would come back out of that grouping.
Oh, that's right, I forgot about that. Thanks for bringing that up, Brother Enoch. We're up to 75 participants. Question, has Christina Davis been investigated or is she currently being investigated? I do know the OIG has, as a result of the video we put out, started an investigation, but I mean, it's the same CPS people who used her. It wasn't the OIG, it was actually the law department, but I don't think either one of them is trustworthy enough to conduct any kind of fair and impartial investigation. We need a third party. But yes, an investigation, from what I understand, has been opened up on Christina Davis. All right, so we decided early on that this would not just be a case in defense of Abdul Muhammad. This would be a case against the people who went after Abdul Muhammad, that the best defense involves a good offense. And so we're taking the dual defensive and offensive strategy, because even if we get our brother back, we cannot leave these people in their positions to continue to do this to anyone else. And those folks are Devon LaRosa, Kishasha Williams-Ford, Kelly Tarrant, their supervisors, and the staff section at Lindblom. I don't do many, you won't see a lot of this from me. I think this is the only long slide that I will read in this whole presentation, but it is a summary of what we found. Kishasha Williams-Ford of the Office of Local School Council Relations, Devon LaRosa, Chief of Network 16, and a faction of Lindblom teachers pressured members of the local school council's principal selection committee not to choose Muhammad. When that ultimately failed, they engaged in a series of appalling actions to create as many public failures as possible for Muhammad, which meant knowingly and intentionally failing Lindblom and its students in the process of manufacturing these failures. The evidence suggests that in response to the smear campaign launched by LaRosa and disgruntled Lindblom staff members, CPS official Kelly Tarrant weaponized the CPS Law Department to launch an unethical, one-sided investigation aimed at prejudicing Mr. Muhammad and convicting him without any credible evidence. Muhammad was targeted and victimized by internal corruption, religious bigotry, and deep conflicts of interest, and his case is part of a larger troubling phenomenon of CPS officials railroading principals, particularly Black principals. So that's a heavy statement. And the question is, can we prove it? Can we prove every single aspect of what we've stated here? And I believe that by the end of this, we will have done so. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about Abdul Muhammad. This was a letter that was sent to Lindblom parents, and I am a Lindblom parent. I'm the president of the Principals Association, but my son is a Lindblom sophomore. So I got this letter as a parent, and it concerned me greatly. It was a letter from my son's freshman year before Muhammad arrived. And it's not from LaConda McDaniel, it's LaConda McDaniel sending out a letter that was written by the chair of the LSC, Ms. Rosario Ayala. So the letter is from the chair of the LSC. I'm writing this email with absolute concern and frustration with what's going on with some of our Lindblom students. I was made aware on Monday of a fight that occurred in the hallway between a few students. In addition to these students fighting, there was another fight that was interrupted by our security staff today. A fight that took place Monday between two other students. And on Friday, there was yet another fight that took place after the spring sports pep rally. This display of aggression and violence has never been a part of our Lindblom tradition in my 5 years here at Lindblom. As a Lindblom parent and chairperson of the ALSC, I am extremely concerned about the behavior of our students. And she goes on and on. I won't read the whole thing. She goes on. And as a Lindblom parent, I'm reading this as a parent, and I'm extremely concerned and wondering if me and my son's mom put him in the right school. And then the next year, Principal Muhammad came. And he has a long track record of coming into schools much worse than that and bringing in order, bringing in civility, helping students understand and relate to each other intellectually rather than through their fists. And so he came into Lindblom and he established a security plan and a security presence. When I drop my son off every day, he's there greeting students. When I pick my son up, I see him walking, not just outdoors, he's walking with students towards 63rd Street, making sure, because as a parent, you know, my son takes the shuttle, but any parent whose kid has to take CTA and walk through Inglewood, I would imagine is concerned. And that first year when my son was there in his freshman year, there wasn't anybody escorting students. The security staff did not escort students to 63rd Street. And he took it upon himself, not just to establish a security plan inside the school to make sure that everybody had assignments, that they walked the halls and didn't just stand in one place, that they checked areas that students would normally use to get away and do things that they shouldn't be doing. Right. And so as a principal myself, I saw this and was elated because I know you cannot get instruction and improve instruction if you don't improve climate and culture. Of course, as a result of this, there was a substantial decline in fights, halls were clear, so on and so on. It's important to remember that he beat out 11 candidates for this job. And I'll tell you, you'll see why that's important in a minute. Many people don't know that there's a principal eligibility exam and you cannot be a principal unless you pass it. When people don't pass it, guess who they send them to? Abdul Muhammad. He has coached aspiring principals through that examination. And up until he got to Lindblom, every single person he had ever coached passed it on the first try. So this is the principal we have, someone who is tremendously respected amongst his colleagues and his superiors. The first day he got to Lindblom, well, one of the first things he did when he got to Lindblom was requested a financial audit for resource integrity and efficiency, and we'll find out why that's important in a minute. Strong community engagement. You know, one of the things about Lindblom is that community members often complain that They are just in the community, but they don't connect with the community because the students at Lindblom are not necessarily from Inglewood. And so community members often feel like there's not the right outreach or the proper outreach to them with us from this school that is located in their community. And so he began that relationship, and he can talk more about it when it's his time. Now, when he first applied to Lindblom, we saw evidence, a great deal of evidence of religious bigotry. And this is very important because this is how it started. This is an example of it. This is a Facebook chat from Mr. Herrera, who actually works in Lindblom. He says, the informant also said, if you don't look or act like him being Brother Muhammad, he will give them a hard time. They did not elaborate, but it took it as if you white or gay, watch out. They were struggling on to say something, and that person told me they could not hold it anymore, and that's why they called. He will be voted with a contract. No one want to go through this process again. Keep in mind that he belonged to the Church Nation of Islam. I really hope everything is wrong. Happy Father Day. And then the person he's talking to says, what's his religion got to do with it? And then he goes, look up Nation of Islam. They hate Jews, whites, and gays. And so this is not the only example of this. There were emails floating around. And so nobody knows who he is. Nobody knows his 25-year track record. All they know and all they seem to care about is his religion. Now, you can look at somebody's record, or you can look at their religion or your prejudices about their religion. They didn't even look at the religion. They're looking at what they've been told about the religion. And I don't know about you all, you know, they talk about being prejudiced against gays in this particular exchange, and they talk about that in many of those exchanges. You know, I grew up a Christian, and I grew up like you in America. And whenever I've ever seen anyone on the TV railing against gay people or banning gay marriage or proposing to ban gay marriage, it has almost always been a Christian. And yet a Christian does not have to go through this. You know, if a Christian applies for a job, people look and say, well, you know, they don't even think about it. And if they were to think about it, they give folks the benefit of the doubt and not necessarily attach this particular person to the religious beliefs and pronouncements of their religious leaders. I mean, the entire Baptist convention does not let gay people in, but you can be a Baptist and apply for a principal job and not have to have this kind of nonsense going on about you. Now, that was not, unfortunately, that was not the end of the resistance. It was just the beginning, but it's important to know how it began because everything else is just an excuse. The original problem was the problem. So Kishasha Williams-Ford is the head of the Office of Local School Council Relations. This is what she did. Her job, she is supposed to advise local school councils when they are selecting principals or evaluating principals on the proper procedures to use. That's it. She's not supposed to take sides. Matter of fact, if you're a principal and you take sides in an LSC election, you can be disciplined. And some have been disciplined. Now, she's the head of the local school council relations office. So she is required, even more so than a principal, to stay neutral and not take sides. They're supposed to just help the local school council with procedural issues. First, she was on the side of a candidate, the assistant principal who was already there. And she failed to recuse herself despite that conflict of interest. Not only did she fail to recuse herself, she acted as an obstacle to the Lindblom Local School Council because they're an ALSC and not a full LSC. And despite constant pressure from local school council officials to go through the process of becoming a full local school council, she would not help them. She would not do her job, basically. When one of the local school council members who was a thorn in Kishasha's side was running for re-election, her name was removed from the ballot. Let me say that again. Her name was removed from the ballot. And it's the Office of Local School Council Relations who controls ballots. She advocated for the candidate who was her friend, she actively advocated, saying that they need to pick her very good friend and classmate. She said she vocally opposed hiring Muhammad, saying things like you should give him an interim contract instead of a full contract. To go with Mr. Muhammad, you're just settling for anybody. This is what she said, according to the local school council, the members of the local school council. She said, I won't allow just anyone to be the principal of Lindblom. She used the word allow, like who is she to think that she has the power to allow the local school council to do what state law says they should do. And then she says, I'm not gonna let my school just burn. Every single one of these was confirmed by members of the local school council in their back and forth with Kishasha Williams-Ford. So that's her. Now, Kishasha was involved during the hiring process. She seems to have disappeared behind the scenes after that. We don't have much evidence. It doesn't mean she didn't do anything, but we don't have much evidence of her involvement after the local school council selection process, the principal selection process. Devon LaRosa was involved during the process and after. Now, first, we're going to look at what he did during the process. The first thing he does when he comes in is he tells the local school council chair that you don't need Karen Fitzpatrick, who's the assistant principal. What's odd about this is that he had just gotten to Chicago from Wisconsin. He doesn't know Karen. He has no idea who she is. He doesn't know Chicago. He doesn't know CPS. And so the statement appears to be coming from someone else through him because he doesn't know what he needs to know to make a statement like this. So it has to be coming from somewhere else in central office, most likely somewhere above him. I don't know why anybody would go in and spout out stuff for someone else unless that person has authority over them. He demanded additional candidates when Muhammad became the last candidate. He said, I want more candidates to choose from. They had just been through 11 candidates. There's no one left. He beat them all. This ask it's an asinine ask. It's an impossible ask. He told them they cannot go forward with a forum when Muhammad became the final candidate. He overrode the local school council by giving Muhammad an interim contract when the local school council voted to give him a 4-year contract and then forwarded that contract to LaRosa to give to Muhammad. LaRosa instead gave him an interim contract, violating the will of the local school council and perhaps violating state law in the process. Now, this is what LaRosa did after. Now, remember, LaRosa is Muhammad's direct supervisor. He's the network chief. So he is Muhammad's direct supervisor. You're supposed to be there to support your principals. You're supposed to be there for your principals, help them. But this is what he did. One, he sent these undermining letters to the entire Lindblom community, painting this cloud, attempting to paint this cloud. I've never seen this done, any principal in my life, painting this cloud over his leadership, planting these seeds of doubt. And I'll show you some of the letters. Then he also told Principal Muhammad, this was after the whole alumni protest thing, that he could not communicate directly with parents. He could not send emails to parents without getting them approved and censored by the network office himself. So, but he's basically trying to, one, he's sending out letters to parents undermining Muhammad. Then he's telling Muhammad, you can't send out any letters. So he has no control. So Muhammad cannot control the narrative of his principalship. LaRosa controls the narrative. Muhammad cannot influence how people see his principalship. LaRosa has the power to influence how people see his principalship. As a matter of fact, when Muhammad was told he couldn't send out letters, he went and told members of his office staff, we can't send out any letters without getting approval from the network. And the counselor was so furious, he talked to the network, and then the network chief gave him permission to send letters out, but not not Principal Muhammad. All right, so Muhammad's subordinates can communicate directly with parents, but Muhammad cannot. So he's setting him up for failure in terms of how people perceive his principalship. Here's one of the letters. that was sent out by LaRosa's boss, Felicia Sanders. And it says, I'm reaching out to give, and this was to parents, I'm reaching out to give you an update on the school's leadership. Today at our monthly Board of Education meeting, the Chief Executive Officer of CPS asked the board to postpone taking action on the recommendation to give a 4-year principal's contract to Mr. Abdul Muhammad. Importantly, the CEO did not withdraw his recommendation and hopes to be able to blah, blah, blah. The CEO has chosen this course of action because of recent information regarding Mr. Muhammad's transition. If that is not an undermine, so you're a parent reading that, what did he do? Right? There's no way to perceive that he did something wrong, and he did absolutely nothing wrong. And then she goes, this has raised concerns for the CEO. And then this is August 24th. In December, they sent out a similar letter. I won't read the thing, but same kinds of undermining language. And again, so they're communicating with parents about Muhammad, and Muhammad cannot communicate with them at all without their approval. And we see the picture they're trying to create. So he gave Muhammad a task list, so a list of things to do. In addition, so normally a principal gets a contract, you just get a contract. The LSC's vote is final. That's state law. But for Muhammad, they say, no, you have to do this list of things. So he accomplished the entire list, still no contract, right? And so the list was just for them to buy time to manufacture a case against him. LaRosa aligned himself with, he met with every opposition group that reached out to him, created back channels so that they could feed him negative information, manufactured information, and then he would feed that misinformation to the law department. This is supervised. Someone comes to me with a problem. When I was a principal, someone comes to me with a problem about one of my teachers. First thing I say, have you spoken to the teacher? My parents knew you do not come to me unless you've gone and tried to solve the problem with the teacher first. That's supervision. I'm not going to undermine the authority of my teachers with parents. And then I told them, if you cannot work it out with teachers, then you can come to me. That is not the kind of supervision, responsible supervision that LaRosa engaged in. He attempted to undermine him at every turn. Again, he sat in local school council meetings listening to teachers manufacture lies that he knew were lies because Muhammad had been working with him to solve certain problems. He'd been emailing LaRosa to solve certain problems. And then the teachers are coming to the local school council meeting saying, this is a problem and he's not doing anything about it. LaRosa, who knows he's doing something about it because he's been working with him, and Abdul has tried to recruit LaRosa in to help him, knows he's been working on, and he just sits there silently, letting them spread this filth, letting them spread this misinformation and not saying a thing. You can believe me, if someone says something about my teachers in a local school council meeting that I knew was false, I am going to interject and let everyone know that it is false. That is part of my responsibility as a supervisor. And then there's the staff. Andrew Heiserman, Christina Davis, Gabriella Feimer, Ian Brannigan, Lauren, I do not know how to say her last name, Levitis, Joseph O'Hara, and Danya Atto. This is the faction of Lindblom teachers. As you can see, they're all white. They did recruit an office staff member to join them in their misinformation campaign, Ms. LaConda McDaniel. Every single one of them together told more than 82 documented lies on paper about Principal Muhammad, and we have every single one of them. Now, it would take forever if I went through everything every one of those teachers did. So I am focusing on one of them, and you can take what you hear about this one and assume either the exact thing is true about them or something just as bad.
Hey, Troy, real quick, before you move on, let me just, to the person hosting in your office, check your chat and call me. We're just dealing with the technical issue. So go ahead, Troy. I'm sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no problem at all. If you need to do it again, please do so. So when Principal Muhammad got there, you don't find out every problem on day one. They reveal themselves as you go along. And many problems about how this staff operated began to reveal themselves. One of them is that several of them violated CPS fundraising regulations. This one in particular, Davis mismanaged money from school fundraisers. I think most of you have seen the video by now. Failed to issue and retain receipts. On several occasions, she did not turn in money from fundraisers, particularly football game ticket sales. Put money from school fundraisers in her own personal bank account. Now, Principal Muhammad comes in to supervise. Now, he could have taken her to and he did report it, but he didn't push punishment, right? He did his job. He reported it to his supervisor, but he sat down with her, trying to get her to do this the right way. And she resisted. He actually resisted. He's actually doing her a favor, and she's resisting, and even tells him that she thinks the money should be hers because she brought her own personal money to the games to give people change. All right, and that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. You know, if you bring $100 to a game and you sell $100 worth of tickets, then $100 should go back to the school, no matter how much of your own money you used. Like if you brought $100 and you gave change and you end up with $2, you know the 100 of that is yours. So she had no intention on giving the money or turning the money over to the school, which is where it belonged. She also endangered students and acted with reckless disregard for their safety. She authorized cheerleaders to practice at an off-site facility. She failed to accompany students to the facility. She did not inform the principal that they were going to the facility. She lied to officials in CPS Sports Administration, and I have the CPS officials in Sports Administration on videotape telling me directly that she told them that Muhammad knew about this offsite practice. But then when Muhammad was in the meeting, the same official said she changed her tune and said, oh, no, he didn't know. I didn't tell them. But she only did that when Muhammad was in the room. So just a serial liar, as you will see. Several students were injured at the facility. She failed to document student injuries. Now, if you're a CPS principal, you know you can be fired for these things. These are serious policy violations in terms of student safety. Any one of these things can get you fired. She did all of these, plus stole money. And the CPS Law Department looked at her and thought, yes, this is a credible witness against this highly accomplished 25-year veteran principal, right? She brought her own child to school, saying she didn't have childcare, despite the fact that she makes over $80,000 a year, has $30,000 in benefits, and I don't know how much in additional money from doing athletic events. We did not get that particular information, but I imagine it's substantial. 37 of her coaches are out of compliance with IHSA rules for coaches of student athletic teams. You're not supposed to even be able to step on the field with your team if you are not in compliance. And yet 37 coaches were out of compliance, stepping on fields every day. Again, enough to get you fired. Failing student. And then, of course, if you guys have seen the story with Amari Kamal, she actually voiced this thought of not wanting to do programs that would benefit students because she felt like it would make the principal look good. You know, and the particular program in question in this example was a banquet that basketball moms and fathers wanted to throw for the basketball team after having a better than expected season. And she did everything she could to block that event from happening, trying to hurt kids so that she could make the principal look bad. And the investigative report is filled with false and misleading statements from her. And that gets us to the last part of this, which is Kelly Tarrant. She is an investigator with the CPS Law Department.
All right, Troy, one more time, I apologize. Who's our host? Truth and Justice for Lindblom?
Yes, Cameron.
Cameron, can you take yourself off mute and let me know that you can hear me?
Yes, hello?
Yeah. Did you get, please check your messages and call me, please. Okay, that's all. Thanks, Troy.
Thank you. Now, what systemic racism makes possible. We have to understand that Christina Davis, let me actually go back, right? You have someone here who mismanaged money. At the worst, stole money. However, she's white, so CPS listened to her. You have someone who was an abject failure in their responsibility to keep students safe. And CPS looked at that. Like, you would normally look at that and say, this is not someone that I could trust to say the principal's not doing his job, because they're not doing their job. But she's white. So CPS gave her credit. They affirmed her and her whiteness to go after this Black principal. You have someone who did that, who seemed to have been an incompetent athletic director based on how many coaches were out of compliance. Someone who has no record of successfully doing anything, but she's white. And the CPS Law Department organized itself around her and her white colleagues to go after, who I would assume are equally unaccomplished, to go after one of the most accomplished principals in this district. We have to understand, like, that's systemic racism. That, can you imagine a Black person who did all of this, right? Or trying to lead a group of Black teachers in a majority white school, in a majority Latino school against a Latino or white principal. See, do you think for 1 second the CPS Law Department would marshal itself and organize itself to embolden and enable those Black teachers? That's systemic. Systemic means there's a system in place to privilege that whiteness, that these unaccomplished people, but it privileges their whiteness over his accomplishments. And we'll see what the Law Department did. Kelly Tarrant was the lead investigator. Here's the general analysis of, or overview of the Law Department. They conducted a flawed, one-sided fishing expedition against Mr. Muhammad. She failed to vet witnesses, and you will see that in our examples. She failed to provide a complaint or notice of allegations. Right? When you're charged with something, you're supposed to know what you're charged with, not for Mr. Muhammad. She failed to fact check complaints. And you will see that. I was misspelled, sorry. Failed to interview at least 28 credible objective witnesses. She only interviewed the faction of white teachers in Lindblom and took their word as bond, as the truth, as biblical. So much so that she did not look at any documents, despite the fact that she was provided with dozens of them. She did not interview any other witnesses, despite the fact that she was given their names. She failed to give Mr. Muhammad a chance to respond to allegations prior to removal. So even when they removed him, he still didn't know what he was charged with. Failed to provide charges after the removal until we threatened him with litigation. Well, let me explain that to you. And she relied on the testimony of compromised witnesses like Davis. So let me explain the charges piece. So this is the letter that went out to Lindblom parents when they removed him. And as you can see, it says he's removed from Lindblom effective immediately due to an investigation that substantiated findings against Mr. Muhammad. That's very unlike most letters they send out when they railroad a principal and remove him. Typically, the letter looks something like, do I have it? I don't, sorry. Typically what the letter would say is this person has been removed due to an ongoing investigation. That's typically what they say. Now, if you ever looked at the news, whenever they say ongoing investigation, it's usually right after they say we can't comment. We can't comment because it's an ongoing investigation. That's typically the excuse. And so CPS typically uses that as an excuse to remove principals when they don't have anything on them, hoping they'll find something, but they want to get them out quick. And so they'll remove them with little to no evidence whatsoever, but they can just say, well, it's an ongoing investigation. And they're hoping to find or create or manufacture something. But in Mr. Muhammad's case, they said substantiated findings, and that gave us the leverage we needed. And so what we did was our attorney sent them this letter, and I'll zoom in on it for you. It says, I'm writing on behalf of Abdul Muhammad, who was improperly removed from his role of principal at Lindblom Math and Science Academy. The letter explaining his removal states that his removal was done as a result of substantiated Law Department Investigations Unit investigation. However, no report of the alleged investigation or charges have been provided to Mr. Muhammad, to Principal Muhammad. Furthermore, Chief Devon LaRosa sent a letter to Lindblom parents and guardians stating that Principal Muhammad was removed due to an investigation that substantiated findings against him. This is a violation of Mr. Principal Muhammad's privacy and defamation of his character, given that no evidence of substantiated findings has been provided. We hereby request that you send a letter to the same recipients retracting the statement of substantiated findings immediately. If no letter is sent before 5 p.m. on April 21st, 2023, then we will take appropriate legal action. Please do not hesitate to contact me or our office. So I want y'all to see just how devious these people are. Look at the date on the top of this letter. Everybody, look at that date. Now, he's been removed. There's an investigative report that they won't give us. We're asking for it, threatening litigation. The date is April 14th. And so now they're forced to give us the report or retract what they said. They know they have to give us the report, and they give it to us. But they also know that the report is empty, that the report is BS, that everything in it is petty and trifling. Just wait till you see this stuff. They know that what's in it is not enough to remove a principal. So guess what they do before they give us the report? Look at that date, April 14th. They send him a letter on April 17th, starting a new investigation into failure to report adult to student misconduct. So now they know they didn't have anything. Now remember, they're starting this investigation and he's already been removed. If this was an issue, it would have been a part of the original investigation. So they're starting this investigation because adult to student misconduct, that's a serious charge. We need to put that out there, give people a sense that he's done something really bad, because this report that we just provided does not justify removing the principal. And now that we have to make it public, we have to start another investigation that would justify it. 3 days after getting our letter, they send him this. This is the same letter up close. Now, here are some examples of what's in this Law Department report. These substantiated findings that justified upending the entire Lindblom community. Evidence does exist to support the findings that interim principal Abdul Muhammad of Lindblom Math and Science Academy was aware of critical inaccuracies in the IEP and 504 procedures and record keeping. Despite being aware, the inaccuracies still occur. Teacher O'Hara has sent, and O'Hara was one of the 7, the dubious 7, has sent a February 23 email demonstrated that he was not invited to his students' 504 meeting, not invited to a meeting. Now that was actually true at one point. Muhammad didn't have a case manager. Case managers invite folks to meetings. So they got a case manager. The case manager made a mistake or two, fixed all the mistakes. And even in the report, they admit the mistakes were fixed, but still somehow have this twisted logic that because he was aware and at one point they were not fixed, right? And then, you know, the aware and not fixed is missing something, right? Typically it's you were aware and you did something about it and it was fixed, or you were aware and you did nothing about it and so it continued. With Mr. Muhammad, he was aware, he did a lot to fix it. It was not fixed immediately, but eventually got fixed. And so when they say aware, but they leave out that middle part, hoping that you will assume that he did nothing about it. You notice how they left that out? They left, and again, he provided them loads of documentation, emails between him and the chief about his efforts to get this teacher hired, this case manager hired for special ed kids. So the findings themselves are false. They even admit it. And yet they say because some teacher says he wasn't invited to an IEP meeting, this is enough to remove a principal. This is, even if this were true, it'd be trifling. Another one. In regard to breaches of Illinois special education laws, evidence does exist to support the allegation that interim principal Abdul Muhammad of Lindblom Math and Science Academy, again, you have this, was aware that general education teachers were not being invited to the student IEP meetings. A teacher-led audit. What is that? A teacher-led audit. They're actually giving credence to these people. Conducted in the fall of 2022 revealed that many invitations excluded the general education teachers. Moreover, many included the wrong teachers. Now, I don't know if you guys know, you only have to invite, you only require one general education teacher, is my understanding, to be in the meeting. So you don't need, all of them don't need to be there. In his testimony, Muhammad stated he attended the PPC meetings and was aware of this complaint. In a follow-up interview with teacher Fimer in February, she says little to no changes or improvements have been made. So they based their conclusion based on the statement of one teacher, nothing has improved. They didn't go to look, they didn't look for documentation. If they didn't even have to look because Abdul Muhammad provided them with the documentation showing that this was a lie, and they don't even cite it. I'm gonna move past this. Here's another one. Provided inconsistent information to Chief Devon LaRosa regarding the claim that you accompanied a student to a nearby Citgo station to purchase snacks after school. Now, to give you some context here, a kid was, you know how you look on your phone for your kid and you're like, where is he now? Or where is she now when you have the GPS tracker? A parent did that for her daughter. Noticed she was in the Citgo, called her upset. Why are you at the Citgo? And of course she goes, I'm with the principal, even though the principal is nowhere to be found. They know the principal often walks with them towards 63rd Street. So she's hoping her mother assumes that the principal's with her. Even though they knew this was false, showed it was false, and even in the report say that the student left the school by herself, they tried to twist it and say, well, yeah, you didn't do this, but the information you provided was inconsistent without showing any inconsistencies. They just say it. And it's insane. Here is, look at the dates here, November 21st. This is him reaching out to Devon LaRosa about this Citgo situation. And this is LaRosa responding and them having a back and forth about the Citgo. What's included is not important unless Abdul wants to speak on it. Feel free if you do, brother. But the point I want to make here is that this exchange was happening on the same day that this happened. Abdul Muhammad invited the alderman to the school and then invited the network chief in as part of the whole process. The network chief on this very same day, while he was smiling next to the alderman and Principal Muhammad, was taking this Citgo information and feeding it to the law department without talking to Abdul about it whatsoever on this day. You have anything to add to that, Brother Abdul? Or did you want to do that when your time comes?
Yeah. Hey, good evening, everybody. No, I just wanted to add that, and I think Troy may mention it in this entire investigation, that the number has increased, Troy, because I was going back through the report. I think we're up to 32 people that were not interviewed by the CPS Law Department that could provide additional information. But yes, on this day where they claimed that I took a student to the Citgo, which never happened, that was the same day that I invited Mr. LaRosa to be a part of this meeting with the alderwoman. And my conversation with the alderwoman was about bringing financial resources to Lindblom so that we could expand our gym facilities. That was part of the purpose of that meeting.
Thank you for that. You'll hear a lot more from the Principal Muhammad later on. So they failed to fact check. And here's an example. Here is the cover page of the Law Department report. If you go deep into, if you look at the bottom, these are the only people they interviewed, these teachers. And here's the interview with Ian Brannigan, the social studies teacher. Now I'm going to zoom in on his. This is what Brannigan told them. On the day of the interview, Brannigan reported that Lindblom had 27 teachers call off. As a result, Counselor Charles Clark and Clerk McDaniels mobilized the staff to create a plan for the day to assist the students. According to Brannigan, Interim Principal Muhammad showed up after 8 a.m. and walked past this large group of staff without demonstrating any enthusiasm or readiness to assist in managing the school's crisis of staff absence. Now, anybody who knows Abdul Muhammad knows that's insane. But if you don't know him, if you're a law department investigator, you might want to fact check this. And there's a very easy way to do it. Anybody guess what that way might be? Anybody guess what you might want to look at? What records you might want to look at to fact check this? Anybody throw something in the chat, please. Let's have some audience participation. How can you fact check the claim that he showed up after 8 p.m., walked past this large group of staff? I see a comment, time clock, swipe machine, thank you. Do you think the CPS Law Department looked at the time clock, looked at the swipe machine, looked at timekeeper? Because if they did, they would have seen this. Mr. Muhammad swiped in at 7:46. Then they could have gone a little further to see when Mr. Brannigan swiped in. Failure to do the most basic fact checking. Mr. Muhammad actually has a worse example with the clerk, where, and correct me if I hack this up, Principal Muhammad, where, you know, for CPS vendors, a principal has to sponsor a CPS vendor. And the principal has to complete certain forms, and then other forms are completed by other folks. The clerk tells the investigative unit that he was filling out forms for the vendors, and that's her job. So like he's trying to give some vendor an in or some kind of hookup by filling out the form for them. But he's supposed to fill out. There's a certain form that he is supposed to fill out. And he tells the law department, that's my responsibility. So to fact check it, guess who they go? He says, you should talk to the Office of Procurement. That's what he says. Talk to the Office of Procurement to find out. Guess who they went to fact check LaConda McDaniel's lie? LaConda McDaniel. I'm not kidding you. It's in the report. They went to the clerk to fact check whether or not a particular policy of the Office of Procurement is real, instead of calling the Office of Procurement. And it's right there in the report.
And it's also on the website. They could have just went to the Office of Procurement website, and it clearly says that all vendor sponsorships have to be done by the principal.
So again, she conducted a flawed one-sided fishing expedition against Mr. Muhammad. She failed to vet her witnesses. She failed to provide a complaint or notice of allegations. Like, y'all know Brittany Griner, the WNBA player who was arrested in Russia? She got more due process from Russia than Abdul Muhammad got from CPS. That is not a hyperbole. That is a fact. She knew the charges against her. She knew exactly what they were. We had to threaten to sue them to get charges out of them. She had a trial schedule where she would be able to have the evidence against her presented, confront anybody who was witness against her. Abdul Muhammad got none of that. Brittany Griner got more due process from Russia than Abdul Muhammad got from Chicago Public Schools Law Department. Failed to interview, now we got 28 credible objective witnesses, 32 now. Failed to give him a chance to respond and failed to provide charges after his removal until threat of litigation. And I think this is where I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Principal Muhammad.
Hey, good evening, everybody, again. Now, just to jump in on that point, and first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here, and I definitely want to thank Troy for working with me in this entire situation, and to help me to prove that, when I came to Lindblom, I just came to serve the Lindblom community, the parents, the students, the teachers, as well as the broader Inglewood community. In the investigative report that we've looked at, and this is just up to this point, we haven't completed all of the our analysis, but up to this point, there are 32 witnesses that the law department did not investigate, but did not interview. For example, they said things were done improperly in special education, but they never interviewed the case manager. They never interviewed the ODLS representative, who we work very closely with. Her name is Ms. Haywood. They never interviewed the Network 16 special education representative that we worked with. They never interviewed the state auditor, Laura Bodeker, who came to Lindblom because of the very problem that is in the law department report. She came to address the problem. The state of Illinois said that there was nothing that was done incorrectly in the meeting. And I gave the law department the state of Illinois, Laura Bodeker's email address, as well as the emails where she said that we didn't do anything wrong, that everything was done properly. And the law department did not reach out to the ISB, or the state of Illinois special education representative. So in going through this report, up to this point, we have identified 82 false statements. I'm not going to take up all of this time and go through all 82, but I will just bring out a few. Troy brought out some, and I'll just bring out a few more. So one of the false statements that in the report that was made by Ms. Levitas. Now, I need you all to keep in mind, I'm the new principal of Lindblom. Walking in the door, every principal who wants to do the job effectively, we want to do a good job. We want to make sure there's no things taking place that will get us as the principal in trouble or the school in trouble, anything like that. So this is why when I first got to Lindblom, one of the first things I did, I got there on July 7th and I requested an audit. That was one of the first things I did. I met with the CPS audit team on August 1st, and all of the information that they shared with me, I shared that with the staff that was there at that time that needed that information. They came in and did the audit in November, and that was for from November to November. So they do a whole 12-month audit, but that was an audit that I requested. So you heard rumors and lies that something, that I stole money or I mismanaged money. And that's just a lie. Why would I steal or mismanage money? And I'm the one that requested an audit and shared all of that information with the ALSC. So these are some of the false claims that have been made. One of the false claims that was made by Ms. McDaniel was that I mismanaged money to pay for the pep rally that I put on for the students on the first week of school. So now parents, the district, meaning CPS, sent an email, which I shared with the law department. They sent the email to all principals saying to the principals that we're going to give every school $20 per student so that you can plan back to school events. So Lindblom has 1,400 students, so that's about $24,000 that CPS gave for the specific purpose of planning back to school events. When I got to Lindblom, they did not have a back to school event plan. So I work with the people there. I know a lot of people. I've been doing this for 25 years. And we planned a back to school pep rally for the first Friday in that first week we came back to school that the students loved. We have the video of the pep rally. We have pictures. The students loved the pep rally. One student came to me and was like, this is the greatest pep rally that we've ever had at Lindblom. So now in the law department report, it says that according to Ms. McDaniel, Principal Muhammad made strange purchases like balloons and a DJ and a 360 booth for a pep rally. I'm not making this up. This is the actual language of the law department investigative report, that I made strange purchases by purchasing balloons, a DJ, and a 360 booth for a pep rally. Now, keep in mind, the money, $24,000, was given to us by CPS to pay for back to school events. And I did exactly what CPS asked us to do. I planned that back to school event and I paid for it out of the money that they gave for that. Another one of it's an absolute appropriate purchase. Another one of the false claims that came from Ms. Levitas was that Principal Muhammad bought himself a Mac computer and 2 printers before he bought supplies for the counseling department. Now, again, parents, I got to, I'm glad your daughter enjoyed the pep rally. It was great. I got to Lindblom on July 7th. And when I got to Lindblom, anybody who is in CPS, you know that you have to spend the money that's on the budget lines by a certain time, or CPS takes all of that money back. So when I got to Lindblom, there was hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting on budget lines that was not spent. I got there on July 7th. They wiped the budget lines. I want to say, and I don't want to get the date wrong. It might be the end of August, but it might be the end of July. But I think it may be the end of August. Is when wipe the budget line, I mean, they take all the money back. So when I got to Lindblom, not only were we trying to hire all of these vacancies, right, which I prioritized, but I was also trying to spend the money before the deadline, and CPS was going to take that money back. So I bought supplies for every department. This is in July, We bought supplies for every department, including counseling. I got there on July 7th. I did not order a printer. I did not order a computer for myself until November 9th. And we have the documented evidence. I put that order in on November 9th. I walked in the door at Lindblom on July 7th. What does that mean? That I went 5 months as your principal. I went 5 months without a printer and without a computer because I wanted to make sure all of the teachers and the students had everything they needed to start the school year. So these are the type of false claims that are all throughout the law department investigative report. That so we have the evidence, and I'm not saying, oh, well, this is my opinion, this is how I feel, this is what I think. Absolutely not. We have receipts for everything. So everything that Troy is saying, everything that I'm saying, we have documented evidence, email exchanges that show that what is in this report is false. Or much of what is in this report is false. Let me put it like that. And I also, I want to kind of just talk briefly about some of the things, because there's been a lot of rumors and just false statements, and people believe what they want to believe. And we came into the year, started the year with that. And the thing that dispels the false statements is when somebody comes with the truth. So false statements were made that I was going to change Lindblom from being a selective enrollment school to a neighborhood school. That was an absolute lie. False statements were made that I was going to start uniforms and all of these other draconian types of policies for students. all of those things that were shared, even when I first walked in the door of Lindblom, all of those things were false. False statements were made that, I was trying to hire my friends. I've been in CPS for 25 years. And in the 25 years that I've been in CPS, I've built relationships with a lot of people. The teachers that have worked for me in the past and have worked with me, I have a great relationship, and they would love to work for me again because they know I'm a fair and honest administrator. So most teachers who want to do an effective job would love to work for me again. In coming to Lindblom, they had so many vacancies when I walked in the door that we were trying to fill those vacancies. And some of the people that we filled those vacancies with are people that I knew over the 25 years. For example, Lindblom did not have a program. Let me go back, because the lie that was told, and it's in the report, is that I made Mr. Clark work for free by doing programming work, and I was having him work for free for months, right? He wasn't getting paid, and it's just a lie. But it's in the Law Department investigative report. When I got to Lindblom on July 7th, Network Chief LaRosa had already asked Mr. Clark to do the programming because I cannot remember his name. The previous programmer left Lindblom, and that left a gap. We needed a programmer, and Lindblom has a very complex schedule. So you need a really good programmer to come to Lindblom and support the school. We looked the entire summer, just like we looked for a case manager, we looked for a programmer. I reached out to the network chief, of course, that we needed a programmer, the deputy chief. I reached out to the person who is over, his name is Mr. Jackson. He's over the Office of Programming, meaning all of the programmers report to him. I called Michelle Clark. The principal of Michelle Clark is a friend of mine, Principal Anderson. Over the summer, I called Principal Anderson and had his programmer, because Mr. Clark was new to programming. So I partnered Michelle Clark's programmer with Mr. Clark over the summer to help Mr. Clark do the programming for Lindblom. Then when the summer was done and the school year started, I called Whitney Young. Whitney Young's programmer supported Mr. Clark to do programming at Lindblom. So not only was I looking for a programmer and did everything within my power to bring a programmer to Lindblom, but since Mr. Clark was doing this additional work, I tried to partner, I partnered him with other programmers to get him support. I have the programmer at Lakeview. He's a friend of mine. I worked with him at Julian. He's an excellent programmer. I partnered Mr. Clark with Mr. Love Jordan, who's the programmer at Lakeview. Mr. Love Jordan respected me so much from our work together at Julian that he wanted to come and be the programmer of Lindblom, because it was closer to his house, but he also wanted to work with me. So we posted the programmer position. We wanted to get Mr. Love Jordan to the school, and Mr. Love Jordan wanted to come to the school, but his principal at the last minute made him an offer that he could not refuse. So this is the only reason. But it's like there's nothing nefarious going on, like, oh, I'm just trying to hire my buddies. Anybody who knows me, who has a relationship with me, they know that I'm not going to hire you just because you're my friend. If you come in an interview and you're not prepared and you can't produce, and it's a group of us interviewing you, just because I know you doesn't mean nothing. You're not getting a pass because we have a relationship. In fact, the people who know me know that I'm going to be more critical of somebody I know than somebody I don't know. I'm not doing favors for anybody as far as hiring. So now, since we couldn't get Mr. Love Jordan, I reached out to the network chief and the deputy chief to get a retired programmer. I can't remember the school that the retired programmer worked at. I reached out to him. He was retired. He said, look, Lindblom's schedule is too complex. I don't even want to do it. We kept looking for a programmer. And Mr. LaRosa knows all of this. In the LSC meeting, some of you were there. They say, oh, Mr. Muhammad is not doing anything to hire a programmer, and he's making Mr. Clark work for free. Mr. LaRosa is sitting right there and did not say anything, knowing all of the backflips that I was doing to get a programmer to come to Lindblom. Not just that, but all of the partnerships that I created with other schools to support Mr. Clark, but he sat in the LSC meeting and didn't say anything, even though he knew the truth of it. So we worked and worked and worked to get a programmer. You know, if anybody who's in school, you know how these staffing things go. Eventually, a counselor who I worked with at CBS, we were teachers together at CBS High School. He was a counselor at an elementary school, great data strategist. We interviewed him and 2 or 3 other candidates. And he wanted to come to Lindblom because I was there to serve as the programmer. And we worked, and he came, I forgot the date that he started, but it was the same week that the week after they brought me out. I think it was April 4th. So these are the things. So these small group of teachers want to attempt to paint a picture of incompetence. But if you look at the evidence that I've shared with Troy, the overwhelming evidence paints a picture of a principal that is highly competent and did everything and went above and beyond to make everything happen. And I never failed in my duty as principal. And at the same time, if you ask your children, was Mr. Muhammad always in the hallways? Was he always I was always there and still did my principal responsibilities. So these are just some of the false claims that are in the report that I wanted to share. And I'm gonna turn it back over to you, Troy.
Yeah, I was hoping you could tell the people a few highlights from your career, just so they know you.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
I think it's
Absolutely.
really important that these people know who you are.
So so I've been in CPS for 25 years, parents, as many of you all know. I started at Westinghouse on the west side of Chicago as a teacher. I taught for 13 years, really 17, but in CPS 13. And I love teaching. Teaching is my absolute passion. And if you sat in those LSC meetings, you never heard me say any negative thing about any teacher at Lindblom. That's how much I respect teachers and the profession of teaching. If I had a problem with a staff member, I took that problem directly to them. I never used the LSC meeting as a forum to throw teachers or staff members at Lindblom under the bus. So 17 years as a teacher, 13 in CPS. I started at Westinghouse. From Westinghouse, I went to CBS, which is on the east side, as you know. And I was at Westinghouse before it became a selective enrollment school, when it was a neighborhood school. Went to CBS, was there for 6 years. And at CBS, you know, the acronym they say stands for crime, violence, and sex, because there was a lot of challenges in that environment at CBS. But the students would come to me and tell me, one told me today when they saw me, that the only reason they came to school was to come to my class. My students didn't love me because I let them sit there and do anything and have free time. My students loved me because they learned more in my class than they learned in any other class, not because I gave them free time and we just shot the breeze. So I was at CBS for 6 years. I went from CBS to Simeon, and Jabari Parker, Kendrick Nunn, Steve Taylor, these were my students at Simeon, these star basketball players, these were my students. I treated them just like I treated all of the other students. In my teaching career, I was awarded the Teacher of the Year Award for the city of Chicago. I was nominated twice for the Golden Apple Award and featured in Who's Who among American high school teachers for 4 consecutive years. This is my teaching career. And if you meet any of my students that have had me in the past, they will tell you that this was the class that they learned the most in. Respect for students, respect from parents, respect from colleagues. From Simeon, I went to Percy L. Julian as assistant principal. That's on 103rd. And in the 3 years that I was at Julian, we completely turned the school around. The evidence, you can look at the graduation rate, you can look at the discipline rate, you can look at the number of D's and F's and what we did to minimize that. All of that work as assistant principal at Julian, working with the team at Percy L. Julian. From Julian, I transitioned to Nancy B. Jefferson, which is the school that is inside of the juvenile detention center. All of the shooters, all the gangbangers that we see about on television that are 17 and under 18, when they get locked up, they send them to Nancy B. Jefferson, or as they call the Oddie homes. I was the assistant principal. Not only did we improve the level of instruction to such a degree that we increased the graduation rates of the students that were incarcerated. But we also working with those young brothers at the Nancy B. Jefferson. There was never a time they could put them all together in the same room before I got there, because it would be too much confrontation. But from working with them, we were able to do multiple things with those students because of my engagement with them. Now, while I was at Nancy B. Jefferson, I reached out to Caitlin Fine, who was the producer, the Chicago producer of Hamilton. While I was at Nancy B. Jefferson, I reached out to the Chicago producer of Hamilton, and I asked her, can you bring the Hamilton play, one of the greatest stage plays in the history of stage plays, can you bring the Hamilton play to the students of Nancy B. Jefferson? Now, I worked with Miss Fine for 2 years. And when we brought Hamilton to Jefferson, I wasn't even at Jefferson anymore. I was at Douglas at that time. But we brought the play Hamilton to Nancy B. Jefferson. And the producer told me, she said, Mr. Muhammad, the Hamilton play has only left the stage twice in the history of the play. Once when we did it at the White House for Barack Obama, and the other time is when we brought it to Nancy B. Jefferson. This is the work that I did for Nancy B. Jefferson, and I wasn't even at Nancy B. Jefferson. And since I left in 2017, I've been back at least 50 times. And I'm not their principal anymore. From Nancy B. Jefferson, I went to Douglas, which is on the west side. Douglas was a school that was neglected by CPS because it was on the west side, because it served Black children. It was neglected by CPS, and it was always a thorn in the side because there was always fights. There was always gang activity, and nobody could go in Douglas and turn Douglas around. They sent me to Douglas, and everything that was out of order in the 5 years that I was there, we brought those things in order. All of the fights went down, the grades went up, the graduation rate went up from 62%, I think, or 63% to the district average of 82%. The attendance went up from 80% to 85%. The freshman on track rate went up from 77% to 100%. And if you walk through Douglas, you'll see banners of 3 consecutive years of attendance growth all throughout the school, because we worked with those students, with those families in a school that had been neglected by the district, and turned the entire school around in 5 years. So that's my work in CPS. My work is as an educational leader, a leader in CPS with integrity. And if you talk to anybody who has worked with me, they're either going to say, Mr. Muhammad is great, I love him, or if they were on the other side and they did something wrong, they're going to say, I don't like him. But if you ask them, well, what's wrong? Well, because I was doing this and he caught me, or we weren't meeting about this and we weren't doing whatever. But they're not going to say that I treated them unjustly, that I did anything wrong, or that I acted outside of integrity. So that is my reputation in CPS. So this is why we're fighting, because this activity that happened at Lindblom is an attempt to tarnish my 25-year reputation.
Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate that. Now, we have some more to do, but before we lose anyone, I want to give people an opportunity who we're going to talk about what we're going to do, or what we're willing to do, or what folks are willing to do. And we'll get to that part. But before we lose anyone, I want to give you the opportunity to sign up if you are willing to do, to take action against some of our targets, or towards some of our targets, to meet some of our demands. And I'll go over those demands in a minute. But I just put a link in, and that link will take you to, let me go ahead and just kind of show you how it works here. It will take you to this website, justiceforabdulmuhammad.com. You go to the website the first time, one of the things it will do is give you the opportunity to register. This is one of the most important things you can do on this call. This is not the only opportunity you'll have to do it, but if for any reason you have to get off the call before we finish, I want to make sure you all see this, that you see the link in the chat, justiceforabdulmuhammad.com, and sign up if you would like to take some kind of action with us to ensure that Principal Muhammad is returned, to ensure that the people who did this to him get appropriate consequences, and that we ensure that the offices and the lack of accountability that led to this is actually investigated and dealt with. So again, If anyone has to leave before we finish, that's the link you can go to. But right now, what I would like to do is this isn't only just happening to Abdul Muhammad. It's happened to 6 Black principals this year. 6, using a similar strategy. With Abdul Muhammad, this is the first one where I've seen that, where it's so incredibly sloppy, where there's so, like, all 4 entities. And matter of fact, let me actually put that up for a quick second. Give me about 10 seconds, folks. Here we go. So you have here the CPS Law Department that was involved in this. You also have the Office of Network Supports. You also have Local School Council Relations. All 3 offices were heavily involved in trying to prevent Abdul Muhammad from becoming principal. And then afterwards, law and network supports were heavily involved in trying to manufacture a case against Abdul Muhammad. If you follow the chain of command from the network chief, the head of LSC relations, and Kelly Tarrant, the lead investigator, and you go up, like, so if you have these 3 offices, these 3 separate, disparate offices, all coming together to do the same thing with CTU members, by the way, it has to be some kind of coordination. And when you go up the chain of command, you find that Kelly Tarrant supervisor is Libby Massing, Devon LaRosa is Felicia Sanders. Kishasha, from everything I can see, appeared to be exception, but she has a supervisor there. We don't have the name of that one yet on this slide. Then there's another supervisor up. Ruchi Vermi is the head of law. Bogdana Skumbova is the head of, she's the chief education officer. And so where do you find a place where all of this can be coordinated? Like, who's the common supervisor that's connecting all of these things? And there's only one. Pedro Martinez, the CEO. And so either it's being coordinated by him or someone at his level, is the conclusion I make by seeing these disparate offices all coordinating an effort to get rid of Abdul Muhammad as principal of Lindblom. But with that said, they're not the only, Abdul Muhammad is not the only one they've done this to. And I'd like to give Gerald Morrow, principal of Dunbar, my alma mater. I have a connection with both schools. You know, my son's at Lindblom and Dunbar is my alma mater. And so I would like to give Gerald a few minutes to actually talk about his experience as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gerald Morrow, and I've been in Chicago Public Schools for over 30 years. I've been a school leader role for about 18, 19 years. My first school was Paul Robeson High School, and my second school was Dunbar High School. Throughout my tenure, there has been a lot of trauma that has been posed on African-American male leaders who have basically taken the most challenging environments that our district has had. Black male leaders have been better to this district than this district has been to Black male leaders. We've basically been the mule of the district to carry the heaviest assignments. Robeson High School improved drastically under my watch. It went from a level 3 to a level 2. We were closely to having 30% diverse learners, 4 or 5 different gangs, but however, we still put structures and systems in place to support our African-American children, especially African-American males. To that avail, they asked me to go to Dunbar. I went to Dunbar. Dunbar at that particular time had a declining enrollment, and they were losing a lot of the shops that the school had because it was a CTE school, better known as a vocational school. At that particular time, we put initiatives in place, working alongside the LSC to make sure that we can increase our enrollment. The school enrollment dropped all the way like to 230, and we increased it all the way back up to close to 500. We put 3 very good programs in place without district funding. One was an aviation program, one was a barber college, and we instituted a music studio as well. You know, anybody knows about Dunbar has great history for vocational programs and outstanding alumni association. We wanted to bring those things back because of the pathways that it provided for children. So we did all of those things. We increased enrollment. We increased the climate and culture. We increased our external partners. A lot of elected officials were a part of all of our things that we were doing, and Dunbar was headed in the right direction. So now things have started to, and this year, I was removed in December. I still haven't had the list of allegations of why I was removed. I was interviewed by the law department. There was various things that was going on. So throughout my tenure as a school leader, especially African-American male school leader, who's not of a assimilationist spirit, I always spoke out to what was not being done for children. That being said, I knew that I would be marginalized. I knew that I would be isolated to a point in which people would start looking at various things. So I was removed December the 2nd. I've had an interview basically since then. I'm waiting back for them to respond. But this has been a common practice, not only to me, but there has been many principals, African-American male leaders prior to me who've gone through these things as well. That being said, this is not a one-off situation. This seems to be the culture of the district. There seems to be there are policies and things in place to make sure these things go on. So this is not about me. It's not about Brother Muhammad. This is about making sure that the perpetrators and the mindset of this district, it has to shift. Not only do they have to shift, they have to put these things in place to make sure they don't happen again. We've removed high quality people, high quality school leaders from schools, and the people who suffered the most were our children, especially our Black children and our most marginalized children. So I applaud the efforts of everyone this evening. I'm hoping that we can come together to elevate a voice, a collective voice that shows that this will not be tolerated. Our schools will not have our high quality leaders removed where our children suffer the most. So please continue to go forward and do what's right because our children deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald. Ricky, we'll get to questions in a quick minute. Actually, Ricky, I'll make an exception for you because Ricky is a community representative for the Dunbar Local School Council. We do want to get to the demands and then come back. If you have a quick comment, I'll go ahead and make an exception. Go ahead, please. Change your mind? Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute. Dunbar, as you know, it was out, as you know, because you went there, was always an outstanding school. We were bringing it back to where it was. The problem that we have at Dunbar, we're going to be real about this. I'm going to be very real. The union is in Dunbar illegally, and IBEW wants the building. They want the trades. They don't want our kids to be trained for those trades. They want them. The reason they removed Morrow, and not only Morrow, but they removed Marvin Nichols. Marvin Nichols had an outstanding program, outstanding marketing program that was bringing in top students, and our student was growing. Body was growing every single year, and they couldn't have that because there had been some promises made to. And I'll tell you about that in another time because that's a long story. But they promised IBEW the building, and I guess IBEW at this time is tired of waiting for it. And so that is really the basic reason why they're after Dunbar. But the sad problem with that is that's number one. But the second problem is that CPS has been attacking African-American leaders, especially African-American males, for a while. And at some point, we have to stop that because how do we expect our kids to feel invested in if the people that are here to protect them and work with them are not invested in? So that's my comment real quick.
And just for a little context for that, I'll try to do this in 60 seconds or less. If you walk down King Drive and if you're just north of Dunbar, but you're walking south toward Dunbar, you will pass the IBEW headquarters, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. It's predominantly, historically, white union. The white unions have historically not let a lot of Black folks into their trade apprenticeship programs. And Dunbar had always stood as an alternative for Black students to get trained in the trades. And when they graduated, they had a license to practice the trade. The unions had state law changed so that these students would not be licensed anymore. And if you walk down and if you see the headquarters of the IBEW, that headquarters used to be Drake Elementary School. That headquarters used to be Drake Elementary School. That was shut down by Emmanuel. You walk another block, you see Dunbar. And IBEW wants that one too. And I can't get into all the information about it because it would take too long, but we know for a fact that that school was promised to IBEW. And so you have the situation where it looks as if they're trying to close one of the last bastions of apprenticeship training for Black students to give it to a majority white union that has historically not accepted Black students into their apprenticeships. That would be one of the most tragic ironies that I've ever seen in my life if we allow that to happen. And so that's what Ricky Jones was talking about with IBEW. And again, Gerald was messing up the script. Dunbar, the enrollment was going down. It was right on its way to failure. Gerald comes in, enrollment goes up. He's getting more programs in. Now that narrative, that failing school, under-enrolled school narrative that they want to use to shut it down, he's messing it up. And so it is my belief that that is the primary reason why they moved on Gerald Morrow. He was too good for our students, too good for Dunbar. All right, so I'm going to move on to our demands. Then I'm going to open it up. Brother Omari Kamal is going to open it up for a conversation about what folks are willing to do, particularly for our young people. And again, the key is signing up. We're not going to go through we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. We're going to get some conversations started, but for people who volunteer, if you've heard enough today to say I'm in, this is your opportunity to sign up and be in, and then we will contact you for planning meetings and strategy in the very near future. Cameron, can you mute Tori?
I got it.
If you come off, if we have to, Cameron, please take Tori out of the meeting. Take Tori out of the meeting. I'm serious. If you come off of mute repeatedly, we have to keep this focused and running. All right. He threw me off. All right, demands. So we have 3 targets. Anytime you organize, you have to target the decision maker. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the decision maker's fault, but you need something to happen. And so your target has to always be the decision maker. It doesn't mean that you're protesting the decision maker. You start with an ask. And if they don't, like a simple ask, but if they don't want to adhere or respond to that ask, then we escalate our campaign. And right now, Brandon Johnson is, for the most part, inherited this problem. Also, though there is some CTU involvement that I know he knows of. For the most part, he inherited this problem, and we want to give him a chance to let us know what he's going to do to fix it. So these are the things we want to ask him or demand from him. Principal Muhammad be restored immediately with a 4-year contract at Lindblom. Gerald Morrow, Kimberly Gibson, and all of the other be restored, and that the cases of all 6 principals who were removed also be revisited, and that there's a full independent investigation of the law department and its tactics. The CEO be terminated, and all of his subordinates in that chain of command terminated as a result of either their willing participation or their reckless lack of supervision that allowed all of this to happen. If something like this happened under a principal, that principal would be removed. That principal would be blamed for the conduct of the people below him, and that principal would be removed. Same thing needs to happen to the CEO and the people underneath him. Direct the new CEO to issue a public apology to Mr. Muhammad, the Lindblom community, and to each principal and school community affected by the witch hunts conducted by the CPS Law Department. Terminate every Lindblom staff member who gave false testimony to the law department against Principal Muhammad. Terminate Kelly Tarrant and Libby Massey and their boss for using incompetent and unethical one-sided investigative tactics that do not meet the standard for fair investigations or well-reasoned findings. Terminate Devon LaRosa for his role in orchestrating the witch hunt against Abdul Muhammad and for incompetent supervision. And there's also evidence that when Mr. Muhammad was applying for the principalship at Morgan Park, Mr. LaRosa was actually involved in trying to stop him from getting that principalship as well, because he's the network chief over both of those schools. Terminate Felicia Sanders and Bogdana Shkumbova for incompetent supervision and for either directing or allowing officials under their supervision to conduct a witch hunt of Abdul Muhammad and other African-American principals. Terminate Kishasha Williams-Ford and investigate her office for ballot tampering, her involvement in the selection process, and their alleged efforts to keep the LSC confined to a LSC status. Reconstitute the law department. Basically, we want a turnaround. You know how you turn around schools, they fire the whole staff, they bring a new staff in, law department, turnaround, reconstitute it. Reconstitute the Office of Network Supports, the Office of the Inspector General, and the Office of Local School Council Relations, and make whole any principal or assistant principals who were targeted by these offices. And again, convert Lindblom to a full LSC immediately. So that's for the mayor. You know, he controls the Board of Education. The Board of Education can do most of these things. I don't necessarily trust that they will, and so we have a secondary target, which will either be the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Civil Rights, the Illinois State Board of Education, or the Illinois Attorney General, or a combination of 2 or 3 of these offices. We want Kelly Tarrant, Devon LaRosa, the Office of Network Supports, the Law Department, and Local School Council Relations investigated, and the Inspector General as well, investigated for civil rights violations and violations of due process. Establish a commission to review all questionable removals of Chicago principals since 2010, and that date's flexible. You know, they can't go back forever. That's a cutoff date that we can start with. We don't necessarily have to end there. And then there's the Illinois General Assembly and the governor, because we may need legislation, right, to fix some of this stuff. And so we want the General Assembly to conduct hearings into the civil rights and due process violations committed by Kelly Tarrant, Devon LaRosa, ONS, Law Department, Local School Council Relations, and the Inspector General, and the proposed and passed legislation to prevent these abuses from reoccurring. At this point, I think I want to turn it over to Brother Omar. Is this about that time, Omar?
Yes, sir. It's about that time. I mean, I can take the action piece that we discussed as well, if you like.
Perfect. And I will also put the website into the chat again while Omari is proceeding with the next section.
All right, thank you for that. And I want to make this situation, this next conversation as simple as I possibly can for everybody. So Troy's going to put that link in the chat. He showed it to most of you earlier if you were on. The simple request is that you click that chat, and you're going to see a light box come up, complete it. And pretty much what we want to know at this point is if you're willing to be in action around this. Now Troy's just going to show it to you again. I'll let you see it. This is what it's going to look like when you click on the chat. You may need to refresh your screen to make sure that you see that, but that's what you're going to do. You're filling your first name, last name, telephone number, zip code, email address. If there's some message that you'd like to send it to us, okay? If for whatever reason you have trouble doing that, all I request you do is put yes in the chat, and your name will pop up next to the yes, and we'll find a way to be in touch with you. If you want to leave us your contact information, feel free to send me a direct message. So you could send that to me directly. I'm also going to put my information in the chat, my contact information in the chat. As many of you all will attest to, I'm willing to talk to anybody, to any of you about any questions that you have after this meeting tonight. If you have any thoughts, any concerns, anything that you want to work out, I'm here and available to you. And I know everybody else in the group is as well, but I specifically am willing to answer your questions from the vantage point of a parent, because I would submit to you that the parents and the students are the two most important groups of people in that process, not necessarily in that order either. I'd say the students first and the parents next. And what I would want to share with all of you is that one of the things that I've learned in this process is that Lindblom is a special school. As many of you all may well know, I am the father of a first-year transfer student into Lindblom, and my son's mother and I, we wrung our hands in making this decision because we had a choice between Lindblom, Walter Payton, and a couple of other really good schools. We chose Lindblom, and we looked at the history, we looked at the legacy, we looked at we looked at the environment of Lindblom. Because look, even with all of this going on, what who I'm speaking to right now specifically are the parents. I know, I don't have to know you to know that you've poured a tremendous amount into your children. And I thank Dr. Simone Griffin for this insight, that what it takes to get into a Lindblom is nothing short of extraordinary. Those selective enrollment exams are a complete reflection of what it is that we poured into them. And CPS cherry picks those ones that are deserving to be in a Lindblom, and they put them all together. And in one respect, that's amazing, because our children get to be around other students who've had a lot poured into them over the course of their lives. The dark side to that, like you've heard tonight, is that there are people, there are teachers, there are officials and administrators who understand that process, and there's a lot of mischief that's allowed to come into the system. And that this mischief has been what's allowed for this injustice, this miscarriage of justice to happen to Principal Muhammad. And so one of the biggest things I've learned in this process is the difference between delegation and abdication. And there's a huge difference. We all know that we're ultimately, as parents, we're responsible for our children's education, but we delegate that job to our teachers when we give it over to them. But I would suggest to you, and please consider this, okay? I'm not laying this on you like it's the truth, but just consider that many of us, I'm counting me in this number as well, have abdicated our responsibility for our children's education. And we haven't looked closely enough at what it is for our teacher bodies to be a match for what it is that we poured into our children. And this is our opportunity. I've heard many parents, and believe me, I've been in the exact same places you've been. I've doubted, I've stared at this issue with disbelief. I've questioned my decision to put my son in the school. I've contemplated transferring, all of those things. I've said what many of you have said, which is that, hey, I don't want my child to be a part of this. But the more I thought about it, and I'm inviting you to consider this as well, the more I've thought about that, I said, you know what? No, this is the perfect place for my child to be. And it's the perfect place for me to be, because I know that many of you know that your children are watching you. They're talking about this. They have their own opinions. And I'm going to come to you students in just a minute for those of you all who are on. They have their own opinions. They have their own thoughts, and they're good thoughts and they're good opinions. And they need to see what it's like when large groups of adults get together and do dumb things, and who they get to be in the face of that, in the midst of that. And they're looking at you for the example. So I've talked to many of you, and I've heard you say, hey, I want to, so a lot of these things that Troy was mentioning earlier about principals and other people who are prone to speak out of this, they're afraid of blowback. They're afraid of some kind of something being held against them in this process. I know you as parents are dealing with the same thing. Hey, I don't want anything to come back on my child. I don't want anything to come back on me. However, I want you to take the case that your children are big people, and so are you. And so really, that's my call, to the parents, that you involve yourself, that this ripping off of these layers is precisely what's wanted and needed for our children to have the environment to learn in that we're committed to they have. And second, to you students, I want you to know, again, I said this before, I'll say it again, it bears repeating. You are ultimately what this whole effort is about. Making sure that you have an example of you in front of you, showing you what it is to be committed to the bringing up of the next generation. This is all about you. This is all about making sure that you have the best environment to come up in, and you're a huge part of that process, even right now. And so I don't know how many students got the communication to be on this call. If you are a student on this call, I want you to know that your voice matters, your thoughts matter, your ideas matter, your actions matter. And if you are a student on this call, I'm not gonna call you out, but if you're on this call, if you're a student, just raise your electronic hand. And for those of you who are parents, if you wanted your child to be in this call, didn't think to have your student be on this call, that's quite all right. You know, we're gonna have other town halls like this. Have them be on these calls. They're deserving to be in this conversation. So if you're a student, just raise your electronic hand. I'm not gonna call you out. You know, I will ask some of you, if you wanna share. I wanna know, and others on this call wanna know what your experience has been like in this. What actions do you see to take? What actions are you willing to take? We wanna hear from you. So if you're a student on this call, just raise your electronic hand. Okay, give it another couple seconds. And like I said, parents, we're gonna have other town halls. Please invite your child, your students to be a part of this process. They matter in this process, and their voices are gonna carry the loudest out of all of it. So
there are a lot of comments from the chat also, a lot of comments.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So I'll look at the comments. So if you're a student, here are the questions. What's your experience in all this? What's your experience been in all this? And what actions do you see to take next? So if you're a student, you have your hand up, just feel free, take yourself off mute and just share with us. What's this been like for you? And what actions do you see to take next?
We can start with Morgan. Morgan's hand was up first.
And that's Morgan. If you want to share, you can. If not,
The hand went down. Beatty. I'm not going to try to pronounce that first name. I'll say all the hands just went down.
right. Maybe I gave them the option to this. But it's all right. I want you to know that this is your choice. And I do invite you to take a position in all this and have your voice be expressed. But I'm gonna, like you said, there were messages in the chat. Let me just take a look.
We have one that just Jennifer, she said there are not many Black teachers at Lindblom.
Yeah.
So I guess that goes into partly of what a lot of people are dealing with in terms of the lack of support for what we're talking about doing here. But that was the last comment, but there's quite a few other comments before that.
There was a question about, related to that, about the percentage of Black staff in Lindblom. I think Abdul probably, Principal Muhammad probably can answer that one.
Yeah, the ratio is about 90% staff is white. I know when I got to Lindblom at the principal forum, that was one of the questions that that was asked by a parent. Ms. Harris asked a question about what are we going to do to bring Black teachers to Lindblom? And with that question, I did, because as I was hiring over the summer, that question was in my mind. So we did work to try to bring some Black teachers to Lindblom. And we also, Ms. Harris, who is a parent, also brought up to me, we had a meeting before the school year started, and she shared with me that she was always disappointed about how Black History Month was not really recognized in the school that is majority Black. And as the principal of Lindblom, of course, I serve our Latino students. And with that same money that CPS gave us, the same money that I spent on the pep rally, the $24,000, of course, I didn't spend it all on the pep rally, but we used that money to put on our Latino Cultural Assembly at the beginning of the school year. So when I sat down with our Latino students at the beginning of the school year, they said, we've never had a principal sit down and help us plan our events before, but I went to those meetings weekly with the students as well as with Mr. Alaves and others. So we did, so that was at the beginning of the year with the Latino students, but Ms. Harris, her comment stayed in my mind. So we made sure that when Black History Month came around, that we did some additional things. So of course, and what the parents and students really loved was the fact that we took over the entire lobby at or the foyer at Lindblom and created this magnificent display with the help of Miss Gentry. And it stayed there the entire month. In addition to working with Alderwoman Stephanie Coleman to show the Emmett Till movie, we screened the Till movie for the parents in conjunction with the Alderwoman. But these were things that came from the comment that I received from Ms. Harris prior to the school year starting regarding Black History Month. We also, Mr. Jackson did a wonderful Black History Month program, and we supported him with that as well.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Angela Williams.
Hi, my name is Gabrielle Williams, and I'm a junior at Lindblom. And I just wanted to say that when Mr. Muhammad came to the school, it really brought a light. I went to Lindblom as a freshman. Obviously, my year was online for my first year. And then my second year, I started to go into the building. It was lots of problems. It was lots of drug-related issues. It was lots of fights. It was lots of microaggressions from the teachers and the way that they treat some students, specifically the science department. And I just want to say when he got there, it was a different lift. It was an upliftment within the Black students, and he brought us all together. And I just wanted to say that he really brought Lindblom up and really helped the admin, helped everything. And I just don't understand the hate and all of this mistreatment that he's facing when he literally has brought so much joy and everything to our school district and school. And I just want to say that he was a wonderful principal and did his job very well, despite all the controversy that he's been facing recently. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Brilliant, brilliant comments. And, so this is one voice, but I've heard this on a number of different occasions from my son and from others of his friends as well. So parents, I encourage you to empower your students around having a voice in this matter. It is important to them, not just, again, in terms of just having their voices heard, but just what Gabriella was just talking about in terms of what they're looking for, what they're expecting, and the difference that they know that leadership can make. So with that, I saw the yeses in the comments. I trust that everyone has been filling out their forms online. There are a number of efforts that need to be managed, i.e. There's as many of you all well know, there's a media campaign that we're in the midst of. We have to alter this narrative. There's a lot of ground that this group has taken with respect to painting Principal Muhammad with a certain brush, and we have to counter that. And that's one part. We have to have those demands met. They're all very critical. There's a project I know, shout out to Mark and Marquis Dreyer. They've been chomping at the bit to get a group around this broader effort to transition the ALSC over into a full-fledged LSC. Again, the parents and the people that we select to be in those roles, we have to have them empowered to make the choice for principals. Had we had a full LSC, that would have nipped this whole thing in the bud. We wouldn't be here right now if that were the case. And that's a worthwhile project and it needs to be done. And then again, there's the effort of organizing our students, and not just organizing students, organizing parents and the rest of our communities, making sure, and look, I'm available for now, but look, we have 109 people on this call. We had as many as 125. And I think that was an even smaller fraction. I apologize too for those of you who could not get into the call because we had the limit at 100. And we fixed that and we got the limit up higher than that. But I know that there were some of you that could not get into the call. So I apologize to you for that. I haven't organized this with the rest of the group, but I'm saying that there's going to be another call that will be able to make sure that the people who didn't try to get back on can hear and engage in the way that they would like to. So with that, we welcome your efforts. We thank you for your participation on this call. And with that, I'm going to give it back to you, Troy. And I don't know if we have time or room for any more questions, thoughts, comments, concerns.
Yeah, this is a time for open questions, open comments. I'd like to plant a little seed for the comments, though. You don't have to follow this seed. If you just have a comment or question, feel free to just ask it. But we talked earlier, if you're willing to do something or if you want to share your experience, just raise your hand. and we were focusing on students. Now, this is for everybody. The way this has to be done is that we have to aim massive numbers of people, or large numbers of people, at our target through specific acts, a petition, a demonstration, a walkout. Right? These are ideas. And so what are your ideas? What are you willing to do with other people, not by yourself? What are you willing to do with 20 other people? What are you willing to do with 40 other people? What are you willing to do, or some ideas that you have that you can engage in a specific action with 100 other people, 100 other students, 500 other students, 500 other parents, 50 other parents? So if you could just take about a minute and just type into the chat your ideas for action that we can take and direct toward our targets, whether it be the mayor or the state assembly. What are you willing to do as part of a group? Or what are some ideas you have that this larger group that you're willing to be a part of can engage in? So take about 60 seconds and just type your ideas in the chat. Or you can volunteer and raise your hand and just talk through your idea.
Excuse me, Brother Troy, there's a question on how do we sign up? Can we put that back in the chat, please?
Yes. I just put it in the chat, justiceforabdulmuhammad.com.
Okay, so that's where they will go.
For abdulmuhammad.com.
Okay.
And if you are not here, let me show you the page, how it works. Here is the page. It may not always look like this. You go to it and this will pop up, and this is where you want to put your information. Well, that's that. Again, partner with the tribes and the griot to get the word out. That's a good idea, but remember, we're focusing on things that we can do together collectively to put pressure directly on the mayor to respond to this. Those are the ideas that we're looking for. Willing to call or email the mayor as part of a parent coalition. That is beautiful.
Right.
Creation of a parent coalition that reaches out directly to the mayor or directly to the school board or the president of the school board. Go to City Hall with parents. Outstanding. Thank you, Marquise, if I'm saying that correctly. And thank you, Kwaku Abdullah. I think that yes means I said the name right. I hope it means I said the name right. The first city council meeting is tomorrow. So showing up there.
Right.
Let me pull this down. These ideas are going so fast, I'm losing them. Groups should go to congressmen and other politicians better than one person. There's a meeting regarding the immigration issue at City Hall tomorrow. Board of Education meeting is tomorrow. It's too late to sign up for that, unfortunately, but I will be there. You might want to tune in. Are we able to be provided with the PowerPoint deck that you presented for this meeting? It's a really good idea. Let me go ahead, and I think I have it on open share. Yes, I do. Now this deck's going to change. And if you have this link, you'll be able to, when you go to it, you'll see the changes. Let me put that in the chat right now. Thank you for that, by the way. Give me a second. All right, PowerPoint link. We're also putting up a link to the presentation we did at St. Sabina, which has all of this information in it. It was videotaped. We're actually editing it now to superimpose the slides over the actual footage, so it'll be easy to read it rather than trying to read the camera, trying to look at a screen. Once we finish that, we will get that out, and everything in this presentation pretty much will be on that video. So you can, this will be a long video. We'll probably break it down into segments. I think the program lasted 3 hours. The core of the video would probably be an hour and a half. So we'll share that as well. And everything in the slides is there. Will there be future Zoom calls and updates? Yes, there will, but we really need to start shifting to strategic meetings. But we will continue to Zoom calls and updates.
Did you see the one where I will work to see how to get a meeting set up with the commissioner?
Which commissioner?
Ms. Murphy?
We'll follow up.
Yeah.
All right, these are great ideas. We will document them. We will document them all. Make sure if you put an idea down that you sign up, and I'll put that link in again.
They were referring to the Cook County Commission.
I know there are like 7 of them though, aren't there?
Oh, great question.
And we want to target, we really want to try, the Cook County Commissioner might be an interesting idea, but you know, the Cook County Commissioners don't have much of a say over this, but they could put pressure on the mayor with us because they'd be like a secondary target. Your primary target is the decision maker. That's the mayor and the school board. Your secondary targets are people who can influence the decision maker. You all are actually secondary targets in the sense that, you know, we're giving you this information in hopes that you will join us to put pressure on the mayor to deal with this and put pressure on the school board to deal with this.
Troy, I think we talked about this before, but attention needs to be given to State Rep Will Davis, who sits on and at one point headed the board of the education committee for the state, K-12.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think you want to definitely reach out to him.
And we want masses of parents reaching out to him as well. I have access to Commissioner Moore and Alderwoman Stephanie Coleman. State reps are heading back to Springfield tomorrow. Will calls to them help? I think they absolutely would. We just have to put together a plan of action where the collective activities of everyone on this call and everyone who has signed up before are aimed strategically at specific targets on specific dates to get them talking, to get them moving, and to get them putting pressure on the mayor to act. These are great ideas. I'm going to leave it open for another 30 seconds or so.
Troy, I hate to bother you, but I just have to say this. I think that there are 2 things we need to do. We need to go back to Springfield and get some laws changed, number 1. And number 2, the state of Illinois, Chicago is not a state by itself. And the Chicago Board of Education is not under the state, and it needs to go back under the state's control. And that's something else we need to be lobbying for.
Yeah, if you saw the recommendations I had, the very last one was to ask the state to conduct hearings and based on those hearings, propose and pass legislation. So I'm right there with you, sister. Is there a Facebook page highlighting this topic? Is there a Facebook page? I know we have a web page.
No, there's not a Facebook page that's highlighting this topic, but there needs to be. So we need to make one happen.
Are we allowed to pass out literature near the school? I don't know the exact answer, but I would tend to believe that it is a public property, the sidewalk, and that you can't go in the school. But I'd imagine that you can be around it, but I have to double check with that.
You can do it from the sidewalk. You have to, kind of like with the voting and the electioneering procedures, you just have to be so many feet away from the school entrance.
Got it. Thank you, man. So I think that's a yes. And so that's another campaign. We could all get together to show up on a particular day and leaflet Lindblom. We'd have to think about what the object of that leafleting would be. But if that's something we decided to do, and if it was strategically sound, then yes, we could do that. Choose one day for everyone to put justice for Muhammad for their avatar. How do we change the law back to allowing Dunbar you have to find a legislator who's willing to sponsor the law, and that's how it starts. And I know that Willie Preston, Senator Willie Preston, is very interested in that topic. So he might be a legislator who we could approach about that, but that's kind of separate. It's connected to why we're here. But we really want to stay focused on the target that we have, which is the mayor, and getting Abdul Muhammad back in Lindblom and having these teachers held accountable. So I think we're pretty much spent on ideas. We're going to make sure that we document all of this, and we're going to call folks together who signed up to start planning our next steps, and we're going to do it within a couple of days. Is there any other feedback or anybody from the commission that feels like we may have forgotten something? Abdul, I think, if not, then I'd like to give Abdul the last word.
I want, excuse me, I want to first of all thank everybody for coming out. Thank you for listening to the evidence that we presented. There's much more evidence to this case than this, and we will be sharing that evidence in the upcoming future. But the thing we have to do, if we want to change any reality, we have to take action. So it's one thing to know the information. It's another thing to act on the information and move forward. And I'll end with this. The parents and the students have the absolute greatest voice in this entire conversation. When I went to Lindblom every day, I advocated for students as well as parents. But the greatest voice of advocacy to the Board of Education, to the mayor, to anybody, is from the parents and from the students. And you all have to stand up and advocate for leadership in your school that you know is going to act in the best interest of your child. So that is what I would tell the parents as well as the students. You all have the greatest voice to make the change happen that needs to happen. So I'll end it there. We will have follow-up. Make sure that you go on justiceforabdulmuhammad.com. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for your support, and have a great night.